What's good guys, Adam Lewis here, and today's video is about vocal editing and fixing issues with vocal recordings. I've wanted to make a video like this for a while because all my previous videos are more about the actual mixing stage, but there's a lot that goes on before we get to the mixing stage. And that's what this video today is about. Doing some of the dirty work, some of the work that's more robotic and less creative, but just as important to getting a fully polished sound by the end of the mix. So I'm going to start by showing you some of the common issues I come across when receiving stems, such as clipping vocals, distorted vocals, vocals with too much room noise on them. Then we'll move on to the editing stage where I'll show you how I do things like reducing breaths, time alignment on backup vocals, cleaning things up with fades. So hopefully you'll find this interesting if these are things that you wanted to learn about. Let's dive right into how I fix some of the common issues that I come across when receiving files. So this right here is one of the most common issues when receiving files from people, and that is a clipping or a distorted vocal. So if I zoom into this here, you'll see just how many areas have hit zero and gone over zero. Any part that gets loud basically is touching zero, and we don't want to see this because this creates a nasty kind of digital distortion that's really not pleasing to the ear. So let me play you this and you'll see what I mean.
If I think you're hard, I'll tell you, I don't care if you're a fan of my work. If we shake hands on it, it's a deal, rude boy, because you know I'm a man of my word. What genres haven't I merged?
So you hear it particularly bad on that line there.
What genres haven't I merged?
On the word what there. The most common reason for this will be somebody's just recorded the vocal way too hot, way too high on their gain, on their interface or their preamp. So if you record a vocal and it comes out looking like this, it's always best to re-record the vocal at a much lower level on your gain, on your preamp or your interface. You'll get a much cleaner sound, because even though it is possible to kind of help this and fix it to some degree, it's never going to be as clean and as nice as if you just re-record at a lower level. And there's really no harm these days in recording at a really low level. You know, if your vocal looks like this, that's fine because it can easily be turned up. But if it looks like this, then it's not possible to just simply turn it down. There is some sort of restoration and fixing that's going to have to be done in order to get a nice sounding vocal sound out of this. So what I would do first of all, if I get a vocal that looks like this, is turn it down first of all a little bit. So come over here to the gain and just pull that down. This may be different in whatever DAW you're using, but in Logic, I would use that. There's also the clip gain tool that does the same thing here. So yeah, I would turn it down just a little bit, just so it's not actually touching the top and bottom here. Then I pull up this plugin by iZotope. It's RX9 D-Clip. And this is the best one that I've come across. There's a couple of others out there that may be worth trying as well, but this is the main one that people tend to recommend, and I certainly do. So just check out what this can do. So we turn it on here, and we're just going to pull this down until the vocal sounds much cleaner.
You're hard, I'll tell you, I don't care if you're a fan of my work. If we shake hands on it, it's a deal, rude boy, because you know I'm a man of my word. What genres haven't I merged? What genres haven't I murked? Man know me, Cam Dog, the waviest, ain't the name on the back of my shirt. And I've been with my girl for a long time, so when I'm around things I don't flirt. Tell bar on date night, drink look like the Galatasaray shirt. What genres haven't I merged? What genres haven't I murked? Doors and them feed the man them, just had a kitchen cabinet works. Yeah. So let me switch the flows a bit, underrated, tight for it. Connect the dots and get the dough for it. One thing I know that I got, that's ownership. Over time when you deal with loads of shit, gotta stay real in the highs and lows of it. Over time when you deal with loads of it, how you gonna gamble your last poker chip?
So you see there, when I bypass this and enable it, it's kind of jumping around with the audio. That's because of how much buffer is required and how much CPU power is required by this plugin. So there's a lot of buffer time, so it kind of messes you up on the kind of before and after there. Sorry about that, but you'll see how much that is working and cleaning up the vocal and just making it sound a whole lot nicer. It's not completely perfect, but it's definitely a whole lot better. It takes away all that nastiness of the clipping. What I would do then, once I'm happy with where I've set that, is bounce this in place to create a clean version of that take. Just because of the processing power that plugin takes and that sort of delay that you're hearing on it, it's best not to actually leave this running in your mix project. I would always bounce that in place and then just bypass that plugin. It gives you a nice cleaner file. You see how much the dynamics are just brought out just by looking at this waveform. And then I would use the gain to just, again, turn that down to a more reasonable level.
If I think you're hard, I'll tell you. I don't care if you're a fan of my work. If we shake hands on it, it's a deal, rude boy, cause you know I'm a man of my word. What genres haven't I merged?
Now, if we move over here, this is one that's been severely damaged by clipping. You see just how square this waveform is. If I show you it at full volume, you see just how destroyed this is. And this really is an unusable take, to be honest with you, but I just wanted to demonstrate what this plugin's capable of. Now, this is pretty much unusable, as I say, but we'll see what it can do. So this is how it sounds raw, but I'm just going to turn it down again so it's not too loud.
If I think you're hard, I'll tell you. I don't care if you're a fan of my work. If we shake hands on it, it's a deal, rude boy, cause you know I'm a man of my word. What genres haven't I merged? What genres haven't I murked? Man know me can dog the wavy aim on the back of my shirt. And I've been with my girl for a long time, so when I'm around things I don't flirt. I'm at a cocktail bar on date night, drink look like they got a Tessaray shirt. What man know me can dog the waviest thing, the name on the back of my shirt. Can dog the waviest thing, the name on the back of my shirt. And
so you see that the result is nowhere near as clean as the previous one, but it does still take away a lot of that nastiness. So if you're absolutely stuck, maybe you've got some sort of old file or sample that you can't possibly get without the clipping on it, then it is possible to do some level of restoration, even on a completely destroyed vocal like this, but definitely not advised. If you can re-record, please do re-record. Now, the next really common issue that I come across, this is probably the most common issue, to be honest, that I come across, is room reverb on a recording of a vocal. So this will be caused by somebody recording a vocal in a less than ideal space, maybe in a bedroom or a living room or a kitchen, where there's minimal or no acoustic treatment in the room. So there's a lot of echo coming off the walls. Maybe they recorded it in the corner of a room, which is not advisable. Again, if it is possible to get your recordings done in a room with less room noise, then that's always best. However, I'm receiving files from people in all different parts of the world and with different circumstances, so I understand sometimes it's difficult for them to find an ideal space to record in. So oftentimes I will get a file like this where there's quite a bit of room reverb on the vocal itself. So take a listen to this. I'll solo that.
if I think you're hard, I'll tell you. I don't care if you're a fan of my work. If we shake hands on it, it's a deal, rude boy, cause you know I'm a man of my word. What genres haven't I merged? What genres haven't I murked?
So it's quite extreme, this one. Most of the time it's not as bad as this, but I emphasized it on this just so I can make the point that even a vocal with this much room reverb is somewhat repairable. Again, always best to get a better recording, but if you can't, then this is the plugin that I use. This is Clarity VXD Reverb by Waves. Links for this plugin will be in the description as well. And this does a great job. So let me enable this and I'll slowly turn this up so you can hear what it's doing.
If I think you're hard, I'll tell you. I don't care if you're a fan of my work. If we shake hands on it, it's a deal, rude boy, cause you know I'm a man of my word. What genres haven't I merged? What genres haven't I murked? Man know me can dog the waviest thing, the name on the back of my shirt. And I've been with my girl for a long time, so when I'm around things I don't flirt. I'm at a cocktail bar on date night, drink look like they got a Tessaray shirt. What genres haven't I merged? What genres haven't I murked? Open doors and then feed the man them, just how the kitchen cabinet works. Yeah, yeah.
So you hear there just how great a job this plugin does. Really impressive. There's also the pro version of this plugin available as well that has more options, but this one is a really simple plugin, literally just one dial, and you're just removing a lot of that room noise. So I'll play it again later on in the verse.
So let me switch the flows a bit. Underrated title, I'm over it. Connect the dots and get the dough for it. One thing I know that I got, that's ownership. Over time when you deal with loads of shit, gotta stay real in the highs and lows of it. Over time when you deal with loads of it, how you gonna gamble your last poker chip?
Pretty amazing, and it does the job pretty well. Now there is some artifacts and some issues still left on the vocal because this is a particularly bad one, and you know, most of your recordings probably won't be as bad as this in terms of the amount of reverb that they have on them. But for me, it's still better to have some of those artifacts on there than to have all that reverb. After applying that, I would bounce this region in place just because you heard the delay there and the buffer size that this plugin requires. So I would always bounce this in place with just the de-reverb plugin on so that I'm starting my mix from a cleaner vocal. Another thing here that I really like to fix before I start mixing is if there's any kind of specific issues in terms of frequencies in the recording. So if there's too much mud in the vocal or there's some sort of resonance or maybe it's just a really dull vocal that's recorded on a mic that doesn't have a lot of high end, or maybe the artist hasn't directly kind of performed into the mic and they were facing away a little bit, which affects frequency response. So again, it's best to re-record if you've got these kind of issues, but if you can't, and this is what I'm working with, like a muddy vocal like what I'm about to play here, then I like to fix this before I start mixing so that the sort of issues are resolved before we start applying processing. So take a listen to this and you see how muddy this vocal is.
If I think you're hard, I'll tell you. I don't care if you're a fan of my work. If we shake hands on it, it's a deal, rude boy, because you know I'm a man of my word.
So this is quite common that we get this issue, and it's generally just too much muddiness and too much going on here around 200 hertz. So I'll pull up an EQ. I use Logic EQ for this. You can also use the FabFilter Pro Q, which is more surgical, which I like. So you'll see here, there's probably a resonance going on around here at 200.
If I think you're hard, I'll tell you. I don't care if you're a fan of my work. If we shake hands on it, it's a deal, rude boy, because you know I'm a man of my word. What genres haven't I merged? What genres haven't I murked? Man, know me, Cam Dog, the waviest thing, the name on the back of my shirt.
So pretty simple to resolve that. I mean, I'm doing this quickly just to show you, but you can get more surgical. Maybe use the Fab filter here.
If I think you're hard, I'll tell you. I don't care if you're a fan of my work. If we shake hands on it, it's a deal, rude boy, because you know I'm a man of my word. What genres haven't I merged? What genres haven't I murked? Man, know me, Cam Dog, the waviest thing, the name on the back of my shirt. And I've been with my girl for a long time, so when I'm around things, I don't flirt. I'm at a cocktail bar on date night, drink look like the Galatasaray shirt.
You see how when that plugin's engaged, it's just a much cleaner sort of starting point to work with before we start compressing and sort of EQing to bring out the nice parts. We want to get rid of the nasty parts. Another example of this would be a really dull vocal like this with not enough high end or no air at all on the vocal.
So let me switch the flows a bit. Underrated title, I'm over it. Connect the dots and get the dough for it. One thing I know that I got, that's ownership.
So to resolve this, again, I pull up any EQ really will do the job using the Logic EQ here. And I'm just going to bring up some high end.
So let me switch the flows a bit. Underrated title, I'm over it. Connect the dots and get the dough for it. One thing I know that I got, that's ownership. Over time when you deal with loads of shit, gotta stay real in the highs and lows of it. Over time when you deal with loads of it, how you gonna gamble your last poker chip?
So pretty easy to fix. Another thing I might do is pull up an exciter like the Vitamin by Waves. Again, links in the description for all the Waves plugins I'm using in this video.
So let me switch the flows a bit. Underrated title, I'm over it. Connect the dots and get the dough for it. One thing I know that I got, that's ownership. Over time when you deal with loads of shit, gotta stay real in the highs and lows of it. Over time when you deal with loads of it, how you gonna gamble your...
I might use a combination of EQ, but a little bit less, and then use this to kind of add some more air. This is like a harmonic exciter.
Man, know me, Cam Dog, the waviest thing, the name on the back of my shirt. And I've been with my girl for a long time, so when I'm around things, I don't flirt. I'm at a cocktail bar on date night, drink look like the Galatasaray. Man, know me, Cam Dog, the waviest thing, the name on the back of my shirt. And I've been with my girl for a long time, so when I'm around things, I don't flirt. I'm at a cocktail bar on date night, drink look like the Galatasaray shirt.
So just bringing the vocal to a nice starting point before we start mixing. Now, another common issue that I come across that I like to get fixed in the sort of editing stage before I start a mix is things like this. So you see here how some lines of this verse are pretty high and at a nice level, but some of it is really low, like here, here, here. And at the end there, it goes almost too loud, louder than all the rest of the file. So how do we deal with this? Well, first of all, I like to set an overall level for the thing. So I might pick an area like this, and just adjust the gain over here to somewhere where I like to see my vocals, which is about there. So that area now looks about right to me on how I like to start from when I'm mixing. So, and now we'll roughly just go through and make some cuts where the level changes the most. So right there, for example, at the start here, you can see that it's really too low. So I would use the gain tool here, or again, you can go to the gain tool in Logic and use that. I personally prefer to go over here and use the gain in the kind of region editor here. So I'll gain that bit up, maybe bring this one down a touch, bring this one down a little bit, bring this one up. I I think that end bit probably needs its own region as well. Turn that bit down, and then the end bit needs to come down quite drastically. So just after that little bit of editing, you see just how much this is looking much more kind of in line and level. Now I've done it very kind of rough there, and what I would do is go through and make sure that all of these chops that I've done are kind of in a good place and not sort of in the middle of a breath. You see a breath here.
And I've been with my...
So you don't want to cut in the middle of a breath. So you've got sort of half a high breath and then half a low breath. You want to make sure that the cuts are done nicely. So I would go through and clean up all of these chops that I did like this. And then I would also listen as well. I would then probably put on my plugins down here, just a sort of rough mix, a rough de-esser, compressor, just to kind of have a listen through and perfect these level adjustments, because you don't want to just trust your eye on this. You need to use your ears and decide sort of how loud each part needs to be.
If I think you're hard, I'll tell you. I don't care if you're a fan of my work. If we shake hands on it, it's a deal, rude boy, cause you know I'm a man of my word. The name on the back of my shirt. And I've been with my girl for a long time. The name on the back of my shirt. And I've been with my girl for a long time. So when I write one thing I know that I got, that's ownership. Over time when you deal with loads of shit, gotta stay real in the highs and lows of it. Over time when you deal with loads, I spent too much time in bed. I'm alive.
So you see how that last bit there was still too loud, even though it looked kind of right, it was still too loud. So we're going to turn that down a touch more.
I spent too much time in bed. I'm alive, so I know that grime ain't dead. Yeah.
Quick tip for when you're doing this, I think it's really important to have a few things actually going on in terms of processing on the file that you're working on. So particularly a compressor, I'm using R compressor by Waves here. Just a really basic settings. This is not a mix by any means, but it's just a sort of, it gives you a better idea of how the verse is going to sound when it is mixed if you've got a little bit of processing on it. So I much prefer to have some level of processing on when I'm doing things like these gain adjustments that I've shown you.
If I think you're hard, I'll tell you. I don't care if you're a fan of my work. If we shake hands on it, it's a deal, rude boy, cause you know I'm a man of my word. What genres haven't I merged? What genres haven't I murked? What genres haven't I merged? What genres haven't I murked? Oh.
Yeah, so I just find it works way better to have something on the channels so you can hear the gain changes a lot easier, in my opinion. Now, once I've fixed any of those kind of issues like clipping and room reverb, I move on to the editing stage of the vocal. So you see here, I've got multiple layers. So I've got a main verse here. I've got verse background vocals. I've got some ad-libs. And then this is the chorus here. Main chorus, double chorus, and two kind of background vocals for the chorus as well. So the first thing to say is that if the vocals come in and they're super low like this, we're going to have to do something about that first of all. So I like to get my vocals to a nice level where I can see what's going on with the waveform, and also so it's going into the plugins at a nice level. So you can either use the gain tool over here to do that and bring it up to a level where it's at least nicely visible and it's providing a nice level for your plugins. Or you can use the actual wave editor and come down here and change the gain here at the sort of audio level, or use normalize, which are other good options as well. But whichever way you do it, it is really important to get sort of a nice level coming out of your vocals so that you're starting from a good place. The first step for me when editing vocals is always to remove all the silent parts from the files that don't need it. For example, the verse backgrounds, for me, they don't need to have all these gaps. The ad-libs don't need it. And these chorus background vocals don't need it either. Now, it's not essential to get rid of all of this, but generally you're going to have things like bleed from the headphones. You're going to have maybe people moving around in the room, the artist moving around in the room. You're going to have breaths on here maybe that you just don't need or want on the background vocals and on the ad-libs. So I will always chop out all of this. So there's many different ways of doing this, and none of them are really right or wrong. It's just workflow and what works best for you. But the first thing I like to do is come over here to this button here, which basically doesn't affect the audio files, but it just makes them appear a lot bigger. So you can click on this and hold and sort of drag it to whatever level you like. Now what this allows is for me to see better. It kind of just zooms in on the waveforms basically, but what this allows is to see things like this here. You know, you can now see that there is audio happening in these gaps that you don't want. And it also makes it easier to edit out these things now because you can see clearer. See this area here? When I take this button off, you can't see that there is actually some useful audio going on there. But when I press this button, you can see that, you know, whatever that is,
mouth,
the sort of TH of the word mouth, I would have maybe cut that off if I didn't put this button on. So really important to not remove things that you don't want to remove. So let's leave that button on, and this would be the way manually to do it. So I've selected the marquee tool, and I'm just going through and removing all of this sort of empty space. Other way to do it is to use the scissor tool and just do cuts like this and remove them. And this is the way that I did it for many years, and it took me a long time. Then I learned about strip silence. Now, I don't know if this is called something different in other DAWs, but in Logic, it's called strip silence. So to use strip silence, I'm going to right click on the region, go down here to split, and then remove silence from audio region. So this brings up this box here, which is basically showing me the waveform, and the parts that have these boxes around them is basically the parts that are going to stay, and anything in these gaps it's going to remove. It's important to pay attention to this area here and not just accept the sort of default settings. So I normally come down to the threshold and kind of turn this down to 30, 31, 32, something around there. And then I will always add some time before and some time after. Just click and drag on these numbers here to just kind of give yourself a little bit of leeway on either side. And then I will press OK. Now, as you can see, that's automatically cut out all of the silence in between the parts of useful audio. However, you can't fully rely on this tool to be absolutely perfect. So if you zoom in here, you'll see it's left a piece there. You know, you'll see it's potentially cutting something off there. So it's always best to still go through and just, you know, fix any issues that might have caused. You know, there's a bit left there. Then what I will do is select all of this and sort of adjust to what seems right on each side. So you can see I'm just taking off, just trimming off the edges here of where the strip silence has left too much. Again, not perfect, and you will have to go through to some areas like you see here, it's cut off a piece of useful audio that we need. So I'll come back to that. But generally, I like to get it right so that most of the files, you see it's not done the right job there, but most of it is looking right, like all of this is looking right. Then I will use the fade tool. While this is all still selected, I'll select the fade tool and I'll just draw a fade on the start and a fade on the end. Other way of doing this is by using this section of the region editor here, but really important that we put fades at the start and the end. This is going to eradicate and get rid of any kind of clicks or pops that the audio makes when it just comes in sharply, and it's just going to make for a whole overall just cleaner sound. But then, like I say, I will go through and just adjust some of these because I don't think I need that. And I'll do this by eye to begin with, but you can do this while you're listening as well. I like to do this by eye to begin with just because I think I get more done without listening, but then it's always good to listen after you've done this and just make sure that everything's cool. I'll do the same with the ad-libs. I'm just breezing through this. If I was doing this for real, then I would take my time more, but I'm just doing this for the purposes of this demonstration, just really quickly. But they look pretty good anyway. And then we do the same with the BVs on the chorus. And you see how quick you can do this once you've got this workflow locked into how you want it. You can get it edited pretty quickly. Now, obviously, if the vocal is a more dirty vocal, if it's got more background noise, then it does make it more difficult. The strip silence doesn't do as good a job. But on this vocal, which was pretty clean, it's done a pretty good job here. So that's strip silence. Really good tool, but just, as I say, don't rely on it to make the exact right decisions all the time. You still need to go through and just make sure you've not cut off anything useful. And, you know, you've got a little bit of sort of give and leeway on each side. You don't want to be excessively chopping off sort of natural parts of natural endings of words and things like that. The other thing I would do at this stage is clean up even the main vocal. So I'll do things like cut the, you know, anything excessive on the front of it, chop that off, put a fade. Same with the ending of the verse, chop that off, put a fade. The chorus here, Just cut everything, put fades at the beginning and the end of everything. Again, you don't want it to look like this where it's actually affecting the sort of useful part of the audio and fading in the first word. You want it to be before the first word, so more like this, and you can even shape these fades as well. But most of the time it's not necessary, but yeah. So that leaves us with quite a clean edited vocal there, and we can move on to the next stage, which for me would be the breaths. Now, I know there's plugins out there and other tools that do automatic breath reduction or removal, but for me, I like to do it manually. I find it's the best way. And the way I like to do it is by going through, sometimes listening, sometimes not. I can do some of this just by eye. I can see that that's a breath. That's a breath. That's a breath. So we go through and we just create a new region for all of our breaths using the scissor tool, or we can use the marquee tool as well. Again, I'm just going through this quickly just to show you, but in reality I would listen, or I would do all these chops, turn them down, and then listen to make sure that I've not cut off any sort of the end of any words or esses or anything like that. But you get the idea. So then what I do once I've made all those regions is just go through and select them all like this. I can turn off this actually. Go through and select them all, and then again come over to our gain here and just pull that down. Now the amount that you pull this down is going to depend on the song and the feeling that you're going for and the loudness of the breaths, you know, sort of how loud they are on the actual recording. Generally I like to go to sort of -5 all the way to -8 or 9 depending on how loud they are, but I can tell that these are not too loud, so I'm going to leave it around -5, -6. Then with all of these breaths still selected, I will go through and actually take a listen. And at this point, I like to turn on a compressor and a de-esser, some basic processing here, just so it gives me a better idea of how this will sound when it's mixed. You know, using compression will obviously bring up the breaths. You know, it brings up the quiet parts, turns down the loud parts. So it's important to listen, I think, for the breaths with some compression on.
If I think you're hard, I'll tell you. I don't care if you're a fan of my work. If we shake hands on it, it's a deal, rude boy, cause you know I'm a man of my word. What genres haven't I merged? What genres haven't I murked? Man knows haven't I merged? What genres haven't I murked? Man know me, Cam Dog, the waviest, ain't the name on the back of my shirt.
So you see there how the breaths are still there, so it still sounds natural, but they're not standing out massively. So if I put this back to 0 and you put the gain back, and you'll see how much louder these are.
My word. What genres haven't I merged? What genres haven't I murked? Man know me, Cam Dog, the waviest, ain't the name on the back of my shirt. And
so for me, they're just a little bit too loud. So like I say, pull them down here to like -5, -6.
my word. What genres haven't I merged? What genres haven't I murked?
And then once I'm happy with the level that I've got them at, I'll go in and I'll put fades between all of these regions. Now the way I do that is by having the drag over here on X fade, on crossfade. So that means I can just simply drag these into each other and it creates, as you can see, it creates a fade. There's other ways of doing this, but just make sure that there's a fade on either side of the breath, just again, so we don't get any clicks and pops, and it's more of a kind of natural transition between the two different areas which have different gain levels. Now, some people completely remove breaths, and for me, I don't like that sound. Sometimes it works for particular parts of a song or particular songs. I understand it can work. For me, I like to keep it more natural by keeping the breaths in, but just turning them down. And I like to do it at this stage here on the region level rather than with sort of automation after. You know, you could do this and automate these down. That's valid as well. But for me, I like to do it at the region level here so that it goes into the plugins at that level. So what I'm trying to do is actually adjust the audio so that my plugins respond to that audio. Sometimes when you're doing automation, you're doing post-plugin automation, so it's happening after the processing has happened. For me, I like to get the breaths lower and the editing done so that before any plugin touches this recording, it's sort of at a more managed kind of level. So the next really important thing that I do on every single mix before I start mixing is time alignment on any doubles or any backups or BVs in the track. So you see here we've got sort of a lot of the sort of ending of words, the ending of lines doubled on this track here. And also we've got a double track over here on the chorus and these sort of BV background vocals on the chorus as well. Now obviously naturally when you do a double layer, a double take of anything, it's going to be slightly out of time to some degree with the main layer. And sometimes it's nice to leave some of that more natural so that it stands out more, it creates more of a kind of multiple person effect or whatever, but generally I like to go in and tidy this up. Now the way I do this is again, clicking this button here to sort of bring up the waveforms so I can see them better. And then I zoom all the way in and I go through and I just move these regions until they just look more in time. Now again, you can do this with listening as well, and I will always listen after I've done this to make sure I've done a good job, but a lot of this I find I can do by eye. I've been doing this for so many years now that I'm pretty good at identifying sort of where we're at with a waveform. So I like to do this firstly by eye, and then I'll take a listen and adjust anything if it needs to be adjusted after if I hear anything, you know. Now you see on a region like this part's looking pretty much in time, but it's starting to go out of time here onwards. So I'll make a cut and I'll just move that piece, and then I might just put a fade there and a fade there to just make it smoother. And then again over here. So I'll just take my time and just go through all of this and just make it a little bit tighter and nicer so that it sounds less messy. Now again, you might want a more messy sound for your song, and that's fine. You can leave it or just adjust accordingly. But for me, I like to at least start from a cleaner point, and then if I want to make it more messy after, I can kind of do that to my taste by moving things around more afterwards. But let's start from a clean place, and then we can add that ruggedness or that naturalness of the sort of more out of time stuff afterwards. So that's basically how I do it. I'm going to breeze through the rest of it, maybe put this on time lapse and get the whole thing done here. So that's the verse fully time aligned. I'll try and show you a kind of before and after with this, but this is how it sounds now with the BVs time aligned.
Hard, I'll tell you, I don't care if you're a fan of my work. If we shake hands on it, it's a deal, rude boy, cause you know I'm a man of my word. What genres haven't I merged? What genres haven't I murked? Man, know me, Cam Dog, the waviest thing, the name on the back of my shirt.
So let me just drag that bit out and just show you the difference on that piece.
The waviest thing, the name on the back of my shirt. The waviest thing, the name on the back of my shirt. The waviest thing, the name on the back of my shirt.
You see the difference there? It's subtle on this particular song because his backups were pretty good, pretty in time. But yeah, you just see the difference of the kind of more messy sound beforehand and the cleaner sound after. And again, I want to stress how important it is to make sure that everything has a fade. So any chop here, like I've done here, make sure you put a fade on the start and end of every single region, just so you're not getting any clicks and pops and things are not coming in too abruptly. Just one more quick thing on the time alignment. You may come across something like this where it's like looking awkward, looking difficult. You know, this has been said a lot faster than the main layer. So what do we do about that? Well, this is where we can use the flex tool within Logic, and I'm sure other DAWs have this as well, but for in Logic, I can just simply drag this out and kind of adjust the timing on that like that. Now, I don't like to do this too much because it does degrade the quality of the audio to some degree.
Your last poker chip.
See how that sounds kind of robotic and weird now?
Your last poker chip.
So I don't like to do that too much. I'd much rather go through and kind of cut things about and then join them with a fade than using the flex tool or sort of time stretching or squeezing things, because that does degrade audio quality. As we bring this part to an end, there's a couple of things I just want to mention, and that is don't overdo this, don't overthink this, particularly if you're sending this off to an engineer like me or anyone else. They might prefer to do this part. I definitely do, because I like to do it in my way and make sure that it's done correctly. So if you are sending your song off to be mixed by somebody else, then it's best to just leave this alone, leave the breaths in, leave some gaps on either end of all your audio. You know, don't take out the silence, don't do any of that unless you know, you're mixing the song yourself. If you're mixing yourself, then it's important to do this. But if you are sending it off to somebody, then it's probably best to leave it to them. I know that I definitely prefer to do this myself. You know, I get through this pretty quickly. It's not a big deal for me to deal with. So if you're sending your song to me, which you can, just leave this work to me, please. So on the previous parts of this editing vocal series, I was really showing you what I like to do before I start mixing. So I was using a kind of empty project here in Logic to just demonstrate how I like to fix things before I start mixing. But for this part, I would like to show you the finished mix, or sort of semi-finished mix. I've just done this for the purposes of the video, but I've kind of mixed the vocals and got them to a point where I'm sort of almost happy with them, to demonstrate the next stage of the kind of cleaning up and editing of the vocals. So the reason I like to do it this way round is I like to fix any issues, get everything time aligned, get all the breaths sorted, all the silence taken out and all that stuff really before I start mixing. So it's sort of a separate stage. And then I start getting creative, starting getting the sound that I like going on the vocals. And then after that, I start recognizing if there's any sort of last little things that I can do to just bring that extra sort of 5 or 10% out of the vocal. So we're going to start with esses and using editing to help bring down harsh esses that are still left in the vocal even after I've used 2 de-essers here. Got the Waves de-esser running and I've got the E2 de-esser by Slate, but there's still a couple of esses that poke out just a little bit too much even after the de-essing, and that's why I like to do this after I've mixed the vocals so I can see what the de-essers are dealing with and what maybe I still need to address in editing. So I'll play the verse through, and anything that sticks out to me I'm going to stop and address and explain what I do.
And I've been with my girl for a long time, so when I'm around things I don't flirt. I'm at a cocktail bar on date night, drink look like the Galatasaray shirt. What genres haven't I merged? What genres haven't I murked? Open doors and then feed the man them. What genres haven't I murked? Open. So
for me, I'm using this as an example. This one is not really too bad, but I've got to show you something as an example, so I'm choosing this. So the S on the end of genres for me was poking out a little bit. So what I'm going to do is just play that again so maybe you can identify that yourself.
What genres haven't I murked? Open doors.
And also on the end of murked, the T is kind of sticking out a lot.
What genres haven't I murked? Open doors and
the T there on the murked. So what I like to do is just zoom in here, identify where the S is that's causing an issue.
What genres haven't I murked?
So it's this one here. So I'm going to simply create a region that's just that S, and then again I'm going to come over here to my gain and just pull that down. Just pull it down to around there, and then I'm going to drag it on this side and on this side to just create those fades. And then we'll take a listen to that again.
What genres haven't I murked? 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 Oh.
Now for me that's a lot cleaner. I'll quickly do the T on the murked as well. Just bring them down a touch.
What genres haven't I murked? Open. What genres haven't I murked? Open doors and then feed.
So I'll play that for you from here, and then we'll show you how it sounded before.
What genres haven't I merged? What genres haven't I murked? Open doors and then feed the man them. What genres haven't I murked? Open.
So before, it was more like this.
Merged. What genres haven't I murked? Open. What genres haven't I murked? Open.
And then after.
What genres haven't I murked? Open door.
Just a lot smoother. Now again, that wasn't the worst example. There's way worse S's that can stick out sometimes, even after de-essing. But that's just an example of how to tame an S when it's just sticking out too much. Another thing that I like to address at this stage is if there's any kind of transient issues. So for example, plosives, you know, a strong P happening, or T, or even a C, like a k sound. If there's too much of that happening at this stage after compression and de-essing and EQ and everything else, then I like to address that with fades, and I'm going to show you how I do that. Let me just try and find a part that I'm not happy with, and we'll go from there.
What genres haven't I murked? Man know me Cam Dog the waviest thing, the name. Man know me Cam Dog the waviest thing. Man know me Cam Dog the waviest.
So for me, the k on the cam dog, the word cam dog there, is sticking out a little bit too much. And I can see already that it's this area here.
Man know me cam dog the way. Man know me cam dog the wavy.
And even the D on the dog.
Man know me cam dog the waviest.
And even maybe the D on the waviest as well. So zoom in, make a chop, apply a fade out as well on the region before. Let me show you the difference this makes.
Man know me cam dog the waviest thing, the name on the back of my shirt. Man know me cam dog the waviest thing, the name on. Man know me cam dog the waviest thing.
A lot cleaner. I'm going to do the other parts that I said as well. They don't need as much, but just these two little bits here just to show you what's possible and how we get this line sounding much cleaner.
Have a name murked. Man know me cam dog the waviest thing. Man know me cam dog the waviest thing. Man know me cam dog the. Man know me cam dog the waviest thing.
You take those off. Show you without.
Man know me cam dog the waviest. Man know me cam dog the waviest thing.
And then after the edits.
Man know me cam dog the waviest thing. Man know me cam dog the waviest.
To me, that's a whole lot cleaner. Now, I want to stress that this is a little bit extreme and there was no big issue really with those parts. I may have even left it. And if you want a sound which is more rugged and less clean, then by all means don't do this, you know, leave these in. Sometimes people like that sort of strong transient sound at the start of words. For me, I always like to just try it and see which one I prefer. You know, in some cases, once you put the beat in, it sounds better and cleaner and you can hear the word, the pronunciation of the word more without these fades and without these kind of edits. But I just wanted to show that, you know, if you do get any strong sort of starting of words like this, where it's a little bit clicky or a little bit poppy, it's quite an easy way of solving that in editing. I'm going to try and identify one or two more just to make the point.
And I've been with my girl for a long time. So when I round, and I've been with my girl for a long time. And I've been with my girl for a long time.
So the start of the word girl here, you can even see how strong that is. I'm just going to add a little fade there again. Also add in a small fade to the end of the previous region so we don't get any pops.
And I've been with my girl for a long time. And I've been with my girl for a long time. And I've been with my girl for a long time.
So without it.
And I've been with my girl for a long time.
And with it.
And I've been with my girl for a long time.
Subtle difference, but I think it's worth doing, worth experimenting with.
And I've been with my girl for a long time. So when I...
Even the T there on the start of time, you could argue is a little strong.
My girl for a long time. So when I round things, I don't flirt. My girl for a long time. So when I round things, I don't flirt. I'm at a...
Just some examples there. Another quick example here.
For it, connect the dots. For it, connect the dots and...
The K on the connect is a little bit strong there.
I'm over it. Connect the dots and get the dots. I'm over it. Connect the dots and get...
You see how it just smooths out that area nicely.
I'm over it. Connect the dots and get the... I'm over it. Connect the dots and get...
Yeah. For me, it's an improvement.
I don't care if it don't make sense. Stick it all on red. I don't care if it don't make sense.
See on this line here?
I don't care if it don't make sense. I don't care if it don't make sense.
There's a big sort of spike here on the word care that I can tell is kind of messing with the compression a little bit. So I'm just going to fade that.
I don't care if it don't make sense. I don't care if it don't make sense. I'm red. I don't care if it don't make sense. All I'm red. I don't care if it don't make sense. All I'm red. I don't care if it don't make sense.
For me, that's a lot cleaner after I've applied that fade. And sometimes this can happen due to just the performance of the artist, but also if you're using like a low-end mic or anything like that. I don't think this song was recorded on a low-end mic, but some of the cheaper mics deal with these kind of issues worse than higher end gear. So if you know, this is a way for me, if I get a vocal that's recorded less than ideally, maybe a lower end mic or a bad room, or there's slight areas where the performance went downhill a little bit, this is a way of getting a nicer performance out of a lower end recording, for want of a better phrase. So yeah, definitely something that you can use in your songs to just get your vocal sounding cleaner and more professional and polished.